Okay, so today we're here. I wanted to start off with something I was a little bit conflicted about talking about and doing, but I figured I would go ahead and do it because it's important. Also, today is maybe going to be a little bit nicer outside, so I would like to go outside and ride the skateboard around somewhere. But maybe that means I have less time for recording some videos today, but we'll see. I think Wednesday I have a live office hours coming up. I think it's at 1 o'clock. So if you're around on Wednesday at 1 o'clock and you want to come and chat with me or argue with me or whatever, then come on by for that. And then, as always, I like to remind you guys if anyone is should happen to care about this stuff. That I have on Monday, next Monday, February 5th. I'll be talking with Steve Fleming about his book, Know Thyself, the Neuroscience of Metacognition. And then I had to reschedule my discussion with Matthias Michel, but it's rescheduled for March 18th. I'm still for Consciousness Live, putting some stuff together, and we'll see where that goes. But anyway, so I was a little bit conflicted about this because when I was yesterday, I was coming home to watch this Nagel talk, which I recorded, and you can view. It confused me. I've been thinking about neutral monism, but when I was opening YouTube to go to that video, which I remember seeing and wanted to watch on my YouTube page, there was this video. Um, Consciousness as a Problem in Philosophy and Neurobiology by John Searle, a talk from Philosophy Overdose, a channel which is super awesome. I don't know where they get all these philosophy stuff, but it's pretty much anything that's there on the internet comes through Philosophy Overdose at some point, somehow. So I had conflicted feelings about this because at first I was like, oh, that'd be fun to watch. I haven't thought about Searle in a long time. And I was like, oh, yeah, now Searle. So, in case you don't know, Searle was accused of sexual misconduct. Uh, it was kind of a big scandal in philosophy. This was pre pandemic, this was 2017. And they did, and there was a whistleblower. They had a BuzzFeed article about it. I mean, it was kind of big news. Um, and it turns out there had been a long history of these kinds of allegations and questionable conduct. It seems, I only know sort of what was available then. And then I kind of think I remember in 2019 it was that Searle was actually, his emeritus status from UC Berkeley was taken away because they had found that he had violated the university's policy and I think engaged in retributive practices, which means, punishing someone professionally for their not reciprocating personal advances. So that's all very terrible. And philosophy does have this kind of seedy underbelly where these type of things can occur, where there's a lot of cult of personality. Um, Activities include catering to these personalities and then drinking a lot afterwards. And the business, I mean, it's not, sort of like sports in a way. It's like when you have a big name draw, that's putting butts in the seats, as they say. I guess they're reluctant to mess with that. And this is a well known phenomenon. And it turns out that there had been like rumors and people trying to make accusations for a long time. And apparently the faculty were resistive. I don't really know. And even more shameful, in my opinion, to me personally, was that for let's see, from 97 until 2002. So that's only 5 years roughly. But for those 5 years, I was in San Francisco when I went to San Francisco State University. And, I didn't know Searle, but I definitely was influenced by Searle. I thought of myself as a Searlean in the philosophy of mind. And I still have those tendencies defending the view that possibly consciousness is a biological phenomenon. I saw in Searle a kind of common sense, down to earth approach to philosophy. When I read his book, Rediscovery of the Mind, I was kind of blown away. I'd go and see him talk. One of my professors, Kent Bach, knew him and I would guess was a student of his or something like that. So I don't know any of the. I wasn't on the inside of any of these things, but I never heard of anything like this. Certainly, no one I knew ever like mentioned any of these rumors. I only found out about this stuff like after the fact. So I was really shocked. This was like when I first heard about this, I was just like having one of your philosophical heroes. You know, you hear about this and that person, and you're like, "Geez, what a creep!" But I didn't know those people. Then suddenly here was Searle, and I was like, "Oh man, this was one of my heroes." I mean, this would be like finding out. Well, never mind. Okay, so I was like really blown away by this. Not that I ever interacted with him or anything like that, but anyway. So there's a creeper factor and an ick factor. But does that mean that Searle's ideas are no good? To me, this is a complicated question, and I can sort of see both sides of the dispute. I know people are going to be having their own opinion about this, and I'm interested to hear what you think about it. But I sort of see that there's two sides of the issue here. So one side of the issue is, look, we got to separate the dude from his ideas, or the person from their ideas. And he may be a bad person. We can all sort of agree that he did egregious things, maybe. And then, well, we separate that from like his ideas about, computation and biology and stuff like that. And then we think about those things independently of what he did, recognizing the terribleness of it and so forth and so on. So on the other hand, then there is the view of like, why elevate this person? Many people discuss these ideas. And we can, instead of talking about this person's version of those ideas, we can talk about that person's version of those ideas, and therefore not elevate someone who's kind of a known problem. And part of me feels like, yeah, this is a really complicated issue because the history of philosophy is filled with people, and people are less than great, in case you haven't noticed. The issue is that people are not so great. We want them to be better, and we don't. I don't know. Some of this may have to do with presentism, the idea not from philosophy of time, but from the idea that we're judging the past by our own standards. But even by their standards, some of these people were not great. So I don't know. What are you going to do with the? Well, actually, I was just reading something about David Hume and whether he was really racist or not. But I don't, suppose that he was. Does that mean we stop reading David Hume? According to some people, one of the great philosophers of the Western canon. The issue of Heidegger eternally debated. I used to be sort of the opinion that no, his racism and Nazism kind of pervaded his philosophy, and so I never wanted to read Heidegger actually. But on the other hand, I could see how people might find something that they would want to take, but distance themselves from that strand of his thinking if it's there. I don't know. These issues are very complicated, and everyone's going to get up on their accusatory stance once we start talking this way. So a large part of the issue to me boils down to whether the thing I was talking about before turns out to be true, which is, are his ideas discussed, the ideas which he defends and discussed in an adequate way by someone else who we could talk about. And so, but part of me was thinking that I'm going to watch this as a way to see whether or not the ideas here we can find somewhere else, or whether or not, unfortunately, even as his character may be in question, the ideas are worth taking seriously. So I don't know. Like I said, I kind of have mixed feelings about this, but I figured I would give it a shot. I don't know how far I can make it through this, but let's just see.
I'm going to talk about, well, you can't talk about the whole subject of consciousness too much, but I'm going to talk about certain aspects of it. And I guess the question I'm going to ask is, why is so much sheer nonsense talked about consciousness? We're all conscious. It's a biological product of processes in the brain, and yet...
Yeah, duh. It's a biological product of processes in the brain. Like, get on board, guys. Okay, so sheer nonsense. Yeah, everyone loves to hear the person they agree with call the other side sheer nonsense. But as I get older, I really don't think this is quite that helpful. Um, and there's a kind of like toxic Bernie bro vibe about this way of doing philosophy, which probably, is appealing to a certain sort of person who I probably was, a kind of toxic, argumentative sort, who I think is. This is anyway. So let's not get too judgmental up here. But I want to. I'm not going to make it through this.
We're going to see in what follows, there are a great many mistakes made about the subject of consciousness and its relation to a whole lot of other subjects, such as information, reason, rationality, decision making, and all of the other psychological phenomena. And my own view is that our discussion of consciousness has been bedeviled by two traditions that pretend to be opposed to each other, but in fact they both make the same mistake. The first tradition is the tradition of God, the soul, and immortality that says that consciousness is not an ordinary part of the physical, biological world. On the contrary, it's a part of a special spiritual world. Consciousness is not created by brain processes. It's a property of the soul, and it has to be created by God. And consequently, there can't be a science of consciousness because it's not part of the reality that science can talk about. Now, there's another tradition that thinks it's opposed to the tradition of God, the soul, and immortality, but it makes the same mistake. This is the tradition of scientific materialism.
Okay, so this is a famous Searle move here, where he says that dualism and physicalism or materialism think that they're opposed to each other, but really aren't. Now, I don't know. I think it's an open question to what extent most dualists are theists. I think in philosophy, dualism isn't associated with theism. Maybe outside of the academic philosophy, it is. I certainly know that theists tend to be dualists, but dualists don't tend to be theists, unless they're theists. Anyway, so I think this is maybe setting it up in a weird way, but okay, so far there's this rhetoric that I don't like, this dismissive attitude I don't like. A lot of people are making mistakes, okay. But yeah, so less appealing in my old age. But let's go on.
Tradition of God, the soul, and immortality says is consciousness is not an ordinary part of the physical world. And that's what the tradition of scientific materialism says. It's not an ordinary part of the physical world. Either it doesn't exist at all, or if it does exist, it's outside the bounds of a serious science.
I see. So is that what he's saying? They make the same mistake in the sense that they both think that science, it's not an ordinary part of the world. Yeah, see, so this is the sort of stuff that when the younger me would hear it, would get very excited, because I'd be like, yes, consciousness just is a part of an ordinary part of the world. Hurrah. Okay, so yes, I do agree with what he's saying. Like my core intuitions agree with what he's saying.
I first got interested in this. I thought, well, consciousness, it's a biological problem. So I went over to the University of California, San Francisco, where they have a big neurobiology gang. And I said, why don't you guys get busy and solve the problem of consciousness? How does the brain do it? What am I paying?
Can you just imagine this guy going over to UCSF? USF, did he say? When I was in San Francisco, there was a nice sandwich shop right over in that area called Yellow Sub. It was really good. But that's where Libet was. There was a lot of neuroscientists there. Libet had a theory of consciousness. It was a bit weird about fields surrounding the head or something like that. But did he really go over there and say, hey, what are you guys doing? He probably gave a talk there, and the talk was like something. Anyway. Holy, what what a comical character.
And you to do? Um, and the
Wait, hold
answer
on. I
was,
missed the
brain dead.
punchline.
You know, why don't you guys get busy and solve the problem of consciousness? How does the brain do it? What am I paying you to do? Um, and the answer was very revealing. The answer was, look, it's not science. Maybe it's okay for philosophers and theologians to talk about consciousness, but serious scientists do not talk about consciousness. And one guy, quite a famous brain stabber, said to me, look, in my discipline, it's okay to talk about consciousness, but get tenure first. Get tenure first. Now,
And these are old jokes, so this is very much a way of, let's say, a pre-90s way of thinking, maybe even pre-2000s way of thinking. So definitely this was a way of thinking, and I've heard that joke before.
I've been militating against that attitude for 30 years, and I think now there is a change. Now you can actually get tenure by writing about consciousness. So that is a step forward. It isn't that the writing is so terrific, but anyway, at least it's a step forward. Okay, now
See, I don't like this kind of disparaging remarks to people writing on consciousness. I mean, you guys, you say whatever you want about whether you like physicalism or you like idealism or you like dualism or you like what the fuckism, who knows. Whatever your view is, can't we all just admit that like we're interested in arguments, like this kind of rhetoric? So I feel like this, yeah, this is like the Bernardo of physicalism. In terms of the rhetoric, not in terms of other stuff, obviously. I wonder if it's just because I have like such a disparaging view of like him now, his character, that now this is like an unappealing way to do, it seems like an unappealing way to do philosophy. Whereas before, when I was young, it seemed like an appealing way to do philosophy. Because I mean, I thought of it as like getting to the bottom of things and cutting through the bullshit. That's the way I thought of it when I was young. Can you cut through the bullshit without saying that stuff is that you are arguing against is nonsense or mistaken? Yeah.
so much nonsense talked about the relation of consciousness, information, rationality, intelligence, and all those things that I want to begin by citing a couple of contemporary mistakes.
Okay.
If you read the newspapers, you will typically read something like the following. There's a wonderful computer that can beat the world's best chess player. And now I never watched, there's a program called Jeopardy. I don't even know how to spell it. Apparently it's not a sentence, but it's got an exclamation point at the end. And there's a computer that can beat players at Jeopardy. Now this ought to make us nervous, you see, because when Garry Kasparov beat Karpov, he had to be conscious that he was playing chess, right? But when Deep Blue beat Kasparov, it wasn't conscious of playing chess because it wasn't conscious of anything. So what's going on? How can you play chess if you're totally unconscious? And I'm going to argue that the sense in which an unconscious system plays chess is totally different from the sense that matters to us, and it's a serious confusion in intellectual life. So let me start by making a couple of rather boring distinctions. It's going to turn out they're crucially important for this whole discussion.
I mean, I would love it. First of all, I would love it if like some of the world's most difficult problems could be cleared up with a very simple distinction that a bunch of smart people just overlooked. No clue of. It would be amazing. I'm fully on board. Oh, this is turning into quite an adventure. Okay, so oh, Johnny boy.
The distinction between two different senses of the objective-subjective distinction.
Yeah, I
Objectivity
know already what he's
and
going to say here. This is his classic move, but it doesn't help.
subjectivity loom large in our intellectual culture, so it's important to get clear about them. But they have two completely different senses. In the first sense, the distinction is a distinction between types of claims. Some claims you can say, as they say, as a matter of objective fact, those are, I will say, epistemically objective. I'm sorry to use these polysyllabic words. Epistemic just means having to do with knowledge. And in the epistemic sense, objectivity is contrasted with subjectivity, and those are two different.
Did he say what polysyllabic means? People are sorry to use these polysyllabic words. Bruh.
Different kinds of claims. So if I say Rembrandt lived his life, most of his life in Amsterdam, that is epistemically objective. You can settle that as a matter of fact. If I say Rembrandt was the greatest Dutch painter that ever lived, well, I think it's probably right, but it's a matter of, as they say, subjective opinion. That's the distinction between epistemic objectivity and subjectivity. Now, related, underlying that is a distinction in modes of existence. And this is the ontological. Ontological just means having to do with existence. In the ontological sense, the distinction is between those features of reality that exist independently of anybody's experience. Those are ontologically objective, and those that exist only insofar as they are experienced, and they are ontologically subjective.
Yeah, so the punchline is the ontologically subjective can be epistemically objective. Is that the punchline? I forget how it goes. How this.
So ontologically objective entities would include mountains and molecules and tectonic plates. And ontological subjective entities would include pains and tickles and itches and headaches and feeling anxiety and all the rest of it. Ontologically subjective entities only exist insofar as they are experienced by a human or animal subject. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, it's going to turn out it's important for a whole lot of reasons. But one reason it's important is that the ontological subjectivity of a domain does not prevent us from having an objective, an epistemically objective science of that domain. And the problem I had with those guys.
Yeah, but how does it not prevent that? How are we going to find this out? because look, the original critique here, to remind us, the one that we're supposed to be worried about, in this instance, is that subjectivity seems to be the sort of thing you want to get rid of when you do science, so that as you give a better and better explanation, you eventually approach one which is sort of from a viewless point of view, so to speak, what Nagel called the view from nowhere. So you can imagine like aliens and us agreeing on the Maxwell's equations, even though we experience light very differently, things like that. Okay, so the original critique was that as science progresses, it tries to get away from our subjective viewpoint to a more objective viewpoint. But when it comes to consciousness, subjectivity is of its essence. So how could there be an objective science of the subjective? It seemingly would turn the very thing you're interested in away. It would poof it away by making the subjective thing objective. So something like that is at the heart of a lot of critiques, like old school critiques of a science of consciousness. So to say that it's ontologically subjective means it only exists from my point of view. To say it's epistemically objective is to say what? That you could know about it from your point of view? Is that what this is supposed to be getting at? So far I don't, yeah, so I don't really see how this is supposed to solve the issue. And by the way, most people, when they really try to drill down on what he's trying to say, come away thinking he's a property dualist. So it's not clear to me how he's going to be defending this view that the mind, that consciousness is just a biological phenomenon, and use these distinctions, these simple distinctions that all us idiots overlooked, to do the job. Okay, let's go on.
In San Francisco, they thought that because consciousness is ontologically subjective, we can't have a science of consciousness because science is objective. But of course, science is epistemically objective in the sense that scientists try to get truths that are independent of anybody's feelings and attitudes. But the ontological subjectivity of the domain of consciousness does not prevent us from making epistemically objective claims about the causes and nature of consciousness. I hope that's clear, because an awful lot of mistakes are based on supposing that because consciousness has a subjective mode of existence, it can't be studied by an objective science. And the answer.
Well, I think that's wrong. That's not what the issue that people have is. So the issue that people have is not that you can't study it, it's that you can't give an explanation. You can certainly, I mean, has he said anything about correlates of consciousness? So no one denies that there are like things you can know about the brain basis of consciousness. The question is whether science can fully explain those subjective facts, given that they are subjective and the explanations of science are objective. So I don't really see how he's answered that kind of central challenge about subjectivity, and this distinction I don't really think clears it up. So, yeah.
Answer is it can. It's a different sense of the objective-subjective distinction. In one sentence, the ontological subjectivity of a domain does not prevent us from having an epistemically objective science of that domain. Okay, you got that under your belt. Now here comes another boring distinction. You need another distinction, which is crucial, is a distinction between those features of the world that exist regardless of what anybody thinks. They are, as I will say, observer independent, or sometimes, just to be offensive, I say they're intrinsic or absolute. And again, mountains, molecules, and tectonic plates have this observer independent existence. But there are an awful lot of things that are important to us that only exist as what they are because people have certain attitudes about them. And they are, as I will say, observer relative or observer dependent. And that would include a lot of things that matter to us, like money and private property and government and the University of Indiana. All of those are created by human consciousness, but the existence that they have is observer relative. It's not a fact of physics, but rather it's an attitude, a matter of attitudes that people take toward physical and other sorts of phenomena that constitute the ontology of money, private property, marriage, governments, universities, cocktail parties, and summer vacations, and a whole lot of others. I'm going to talk more about all of that civilization stuff on Thursday, but I want you to see now that there is a domain of reality about which we can make epistemically objective claims, which is observer dependent. That is to say, it's created by consciousness. Now, here's an interesting fact that's going to emerge as something.
So we get to say that money is observer dependent in this sense, but we can study it and predict the economy and stuff like that objectively. Is economics a science? I don't know. Moving on. Okay, so I don't see how this is going to pan out, but in my quest to understand, let's continue.
Later. The consciousness that creates civilization creates an observer-relative ontology. It creates an observer-relative ontology, but the consciousness that creates it, though ontologically subjective, is not observer-relative. On the contrary, it's intrinsic. So this stuff I carry around in my wallet, I'll show off how rich I am here. Here's a dollar bill. This is money only because we think it's money, okay? So its being money is not intrinsic or observer independent, it's observer relative. But the fact that I think it's money, that's absolute. That's observer independent. The consciousness that creates civilization, though it creates an observer relative set of entities, is not itself observer relative. Okay, now then, we got some basic distinctions under our belt. Now I want to tell you about some mistakes that are being made as we sit here.
Okay, here we go. Rhetoric. Let's go. All right, I'm curious to hear what he thinks these mistakes are. It's going to be longer than I thought I was going to have to spend to decide this, but let's continue.
It takes my breath away when I read these. There's a book that's just coming out by a guy who argues as follows. We now are getting close to having intelligent computers, and very soon we're going to have super intelligent computers. The guy's name is Bostrom.
I knew it. Oh, he's firing shots. Okay. The book Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom. Okay. How the Bostrom's argument's going to depend on him mistaking these distinctions? When was this recorded? This seems pretty recent, but it was put up 1 year ago by Philosophy Overdose. But when did he give this talk? Who's letting him still give talks? What's going on around here? All right, so anyway, like I said, I do agree ultimately with Searle's conclusion, but I'm not really agreeing with the way we're getting there. So let's continue.
In Oxford. And here's what Bostrom says.
Oh, God.
When we get super intelligent computers, they're going to be so much more intelligent than we are that they're likely to rise up and kill us all. They're likely to just overthrow all of us. Now, I want to ask this guy, why don't you just pull the plug?
Holy shit. What the fuck? That's Bostrom's argument. Yeah, you nailed it, bro. That's exactly what it is. I mean, obviously, that's not Bostrom's argument. He doesn't think they'll rise up and kill us. He thinks, in fact, there are all sorts of unanticipated ways we could meet our unintended fate. Why don't you just unplug them? If they're more smart than us, if they're super intelligent, they ain't gonna let you, dummy. So, wow, comical. This is classic. I mean, the paperclip argument from Bostrom is supposed to exactly show that even if you had some super intelligence doing a mundane task like just building paperclips, that there could be unintended consequences, like that it would have to use all the resources on Earth to make paperclips because it computed a 0.0005 probability that the number of paperclips it made was insufficient or they were malformed or something like that. And so it would just keep making paperclips. And I think the main argument that we're going to meet our doom is not that it wants to destroy us, but that we are made of resources that the intelligence could use for something else. And we just won't matter to it because it will have some other primary goal. Them rising up is one scenario, I guess, but that's not the one that's what I talked about in the book very much. Okay, come on, man. Wow, embarrassing. Okay, so.
But, that seems like, that seems a bit Philistine. I want to say there's got to be some more deep phenomenon going on here. And there's another guy, I have to review these books, so I had to read them more carefully than I otherwise would. There's another guy named Floridi, also teaches in Oxford, and Floridi says, we've entered a new era. There's a new revolution. Copernicus announced the Copernican revolution, that we were no longer the center of the universe. Darwin announced the Darwinian revolution, that we were not God's special creation. Freud announced the Freudian revolution, that we weren't in control of our own minds. And somebody, presumably the author, is now announcing the fourth revolution, the information revolution. Not only do we know a hell of a lot, that's information, but in fact, everything is information. We live in a universe of information, and he says in a wonderful parody of Hegel, what is real is information, and what is information is what is real. It's a parody of Hegel's what's rational is real and what's real is rational. But in any case, I have deep suspicions about both of these claims, and I now want to articulate my suspicions. First, I'll get a drink of water. Now, I have to cover a lot of ground. I hope I'm not talking too fast. Everybody looks like they understand everything so far. This is the illusion that professors get. And then you read the blue books. But anyway, okay.
Ouch, dude.
Here goes. Let us consider these notions that we've been talking about, information and computation. And let's start with computation. Now, as you all know, the original meaning of computer was it was a person who computes. A computer was a guy who computes. The same way a runner is a guy who runs, or a singer is somebody who sings. So a computer was a person who computes.
There are also women computers, by the way, Searle, mister.
This is why Turing's famous article is called Computing Machinery and Intelligence. Not called Computers and Intelligence, because computers named a profession, a class of people whose job was to compute. And nowadays, with the invention of a device called a digital computer, the word has changed its meaning. Computer now is used to mean a piece of machinery and not a type of person. By the way, the guy who's responsible for that is Turing. Turing invented a wonderful device called the Turing machine. And the Turing machine is unique in that it does what...
Why did the screen just turn blue like that? Qualia. Is that on the computer? Whoa.
Any computer can do, what any real live human computer can do, using only two kinds of symbols. These are usually thought of as zeros and ones, but anything will do. And indeed, in a wonderful argument presented independently by both Turing and Alonzo Church, they show that any algorithm at all can be implemented on a Turing machine, on a device that uses only two kinds of symbols. It's a wonderful original idea, and it has transformed all of our lives because, though strictly speaking, the notion of a Turing machine is the notion of something formal and abstract. I mean, you can't go into a shop and say, I want to buy a Turing machine, because it's not something you can weighs anything. You can't pour beer on a Turing machine. I did once on a real computer. And you can't drop it on the floor. But for practical purposes, the machine that you buy in the store is a Turing machine, because it operates with two types of symbols. They're not...
I mean, the point he's making is just that the Turing machines from Turing are a bit of mathematics. What we would call a program nowadays is really what a Turing machine is. But... Anyway.
I'm very literal. My instinct is to open up the damn thing and find the zeros and ones. But there aren't any zeros and ones in there. There are such things as variable rates of electrical voltage levels, and they do this at such stunning speed that we can now do all kinds of marvelous things with computers. But what Turing didn't notice is that in changing the meaning of the word computer, he also changed the meaning of the word computation. Let's ask ourselves, is computation, as defined by Turing, is that observer independent, or is it observer relative? Well, contrast me adding 2 plus 2 to get 4. Now, that's a computation. I'm a computer carrying out a computation. But that is observer independent. That's intrinsic. It doesn't matter what other people say. They say, well, you're not really doing addition. Oh, yes, I am. I am doing addition. That's observer independent. But when I take my pocket calculator and do 2 plus 2 equals 4, that's observer. They say, well, you're not really doing addition. Oh, yes, I am. Now, that's a computation. I'm a computer carrying out a computation. But that is observer independent. That's intrinsic. It doesn't matter what other people say. They say, well, you're not really doing addition. Oh, yes, I am. I am doing addition. That's observer independent. But when I take my pocket...
Is that his reputation of Kripkenstein? By the way, the Kripkenstein paradox is always about your past practices, not your current practices. So it's always about you're following the rule now, but were you before, and do you have good reason to think you were? So this doesn't.
Calculator and do 2 plus 2 equals 4. The result is not something that is observer independent. The processes are computation only relative to a computational interpretation. Computation, as defined by Alan Turing and is now common in the literature on the subject, is an observer relative notion. It's not a fact of physics that the machine is computing. Rather, the fact of physics enables us to attach a computation.
Okay, so this is Searle's well-known critique that computations are observer relative. I think this has pretty much been answered by people who like computation, by like David Chalmers, for example, who think that there's a kind of computation that's observer independent that involves like the way the machine, the system would have responded in counterfactuals, an analysis of the it would have done this if the state had been started in a different thing. So that there is a way, I mean, the details are tricky, but I think you can define it if you're careful. So, okay, this doesn't seem all that exciting.
Interpretation to the operations of the machine. But that's the first important result I want to state tonight, and that is that computation is observer relative. Computations are either performed by conscious agents, those are observer independent, and those are intrinsic, but the computation that's performed by the piece of machinery you own, that is all observer relative. Nothing wrong with that, because we know.
I wonder, now that I'm thinking about it, what is confused about the like large language models? Are they relative or independent? Because they are more like brains. Yeah. Anyway, so great.
That though all observer relative phenomena contain an element of ontological subjectivity, it's only relative to conscious agents that they have the observer relative features, that does not prevent us from making epistemically objective claims about that domain. We can make epistemically objective claims, such as I wrote a book using the Word program of Microsoft, and that's epistemically objective, even though Word program does not name a feature of physics. It names an observer relative phenomena that we have found ways to attach to physical phenomena, to electrical state transitions. Okay, now let's slow down and think about computation, because it's going to be important for the rest of the discussion. In the standard accounts, the early claims were that they had invented computers that could actually have thought processes. And my favorite here was John McCarthy of Stanford, who said, even a machine as simple as a thermostat can have beliefs.
Yeah, wait, but this is all old school stuff. So is he not going to talk about consciousness at all? How are we going to get around this dualism, physicalism stuff? I know his critique of like this stuff. This is not the part I was interested in. I mean, it's interesting stuff, I guess, and I always was like on his side, intuitionally speaking. My intuitions are on his side, but I'm also skeptical of intuitions. So I'm skeptical of taking those intuitions at face value.
And I said to him, "Oh, John, what beliefs does your thermostat have?" And he said, "My thermostat has 3 beliefs. It's too cold in here, it's too hot in here, or it's just right in here." Now, the pedant in me wanted to say, that's bad thermostat science. The thermostat's a bimetallic strip. It's only got maximum 2 beliefs, but it doesn't have any beliefs at all. Why? The attribution of beliefs to the thermostat is an attribution of observer relative intentionality. There's no literally any beliefs in the thermostat. We can treat the thermostat as if it had beliefs, as we can treat the computer, as if it had memory, as if it was annoyed with me when it complains about my ineptitude at operating the keyboard. But none of that is intrinsic or observer independent. All of that is observer relative. Now that led me to advance an argument which went as follows. The standard definition of computation that we have from Alan Turing is that computation is a matter of manipulating syntax, manipulating symbols, as I said, usually thought of as zeros and ones, but any symbols will do. But of course, the syntax of the computational operation is not sufficient for the semantics of actual human cognition. So if you have a computer that can answer questions in Chinese, it doesn't follow that the computer understands Chinese. On the contrary, it couldn't understand Chinese, because to understand Chinese, you have to have something more than syntax. You've got to have semantics. You have to know what the words mean. And I illustrated.
Well, yeah, so this is his Chinese room argument. My intuitions definitely line up with this, but of course, there's so many responses that you can give. that it's the room with all its parts that understand Chinese, that the system has to interact with the world in a certain way, then it would understand Chinese. Anyway, so I don't find this argument convincing anymore, but my intuition still agree with this. But what does it have to do with consciousness? This has to do with intentionality.
Treating myself as the computer. Imagine I'm locked in a room and I'm given a bunch of questions in Chinese, and then I look up what I'm supposed to do in the computer program, and I give back answers in Chinese. Now, unknown to me, the input consists of questions, and the rules that I follow to give back Chinese symbols as answers, those are answers to the questions, and we'll suppose that the guys get so good at writing the program, and I get so good at shuffling the symbols, that my answers are indistinguishable from a native Chinese speaker. I pass the famous Turing test for understanding Chinese.
But yeah, so this is his famous response. It doesn't work, because his argument is supposed to be that, well, I, Searle, don't understand Chinese by doing this. Therefore, syntax is not enough. But the response is no, there is maybe you've created another mind that understands Chinese. It would be very simple. Maybe that's all it does is understand Chinese. But it's running you're basically you plus the cars plus it count as a system, and that system understands Chinese, and you don't have to be consciously understanding Chinese for that system to understand Chinese. That's a very mind expanding way to think about the argument. Searle has never been able to really entertain the possibility of functionalism really being true, I would say. And so I don't think his response really gets at the main issue. It just begs the question, super begs the question. It mega begs the question. So yeah, so far I'm not finding much that we want to save here. But we haven't got to the bit about consciousness.
Oh, same. I don't understand a word of Chinese, and there's no way I could, because I'm just a computer. I have what the computer has. I simply have rules for manipulating symbols. I have a syntax, but no semantics, and the human cognition requires more than a syntax. It requires a semantics. Now, I thought that was kind of an obvious argument, and I felt vaguely embarrassed that we get paid money to present such simple arguments. You'd be surprised at the amount of crap that was thrown at me. In the introductory speech, it was kindly mentioned how many times my article is referred to, but he forgot to mention how many attacks there are.
Yeah, exactly.
At last count, I counted 200 published attacks in English alone. I'm leaving out Turkish and Swahili and lots of other languages. Anyway, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but some of the attacks were...
I mean, listen, so I'm not John Searle, obviously, but if I published a paper that there were 200 smart people disagreed, at least, and wrote different things about it, I wouldn't go around saying this is an obvious, simple-minded thing that everyone should accept. I would say something else. Holy mackerel. Okay. But I'm trying to get to the concept.
They were sort of fun in that they revealed the fundamental behaviorism underlying the computational picture. And the idea was, well, look, the machine behaves as if it understood Chinese, so it must understand Chinese. And one guy, this was in a public debate, said, suppose we ask you the question, do you understand Chinese? Ha! And you give back the answer, yes. Well, doesn't that show? Well, let's try that out. I think let's take it seriously. I get a symbol that looks like this. This will be in a dialect of Chinese that some of you won't recognize. And that question means, do you understand Chinese? I don't know what it means. I got this symbol. So I look up in the book what I'm supposed to do, and it says when you get that symbol, give them back a symbol that looks like this. It's in that same dialect of Chinese. And this symbol means...
All right, so maybe this is how I don't care about this rhetoric, but maybe this is how he's trying to get to consciousness, because the behaviorism is just that you behave appropriately, but his question is like there's a phenomenology of understanding or something, like a consciousness, a conscious experience associated with understanding Chinese. I mean, even so, it's not clear you haven't created that in some non-physical way or something like that by doing this, and it wouldn't be shared or part of you. So I still see this as question begging. Look, I want to agree with the conclusion, guys. I'm looking for a reason to agree, but I don't think he's given... I don't think the Chinese room argument, he's really addressing the main objections to it. This mocking of Chinese script certainly doesn't do it. I mean, even if you thought that computers we built were like that, the brain might be like a naturally built computer that has its own semantics. So even if you think this argument works, it doesn't show anything about the brain, I would say. So yeah, I'm not finding as much as I thought I would to agree with. Notice he's begging the question there. So, holy shit, you guys! I just realized you can't even. I'm just been sitting here going. You haven't been hearing the nonsense. You haven't been hearing the nonsense. Let me rewind this a little bit.
To a syntactical interpretation. And if you look at the literature on this, and as I mentioned these two books by Bostrom and Floridi,
This
if
is
you
where
look
he
at the
mentions
literature,
two
the
books by
crucial
Bostrom and
notions,
Floridi again.
the notion of computation, of information, of reasoning, of deciding, of rationality, all of those have two different senses. They have an observer independent sense, where they describe actual psychological phenomena, and they have an observer relative sense, where they describe something going on in the machinery that we are able to interpret using the psychological vocabulary. There's nothing wrong with that. That seems to me perfectly legitimate to say, my computer today has a better memory than the computer I had 20 years ago. And I use the word memory there, but it doesn't mean anything Proustian. It doesn't mean the computer is reflecting on its happy life when it was just a child in China. No, it does not have any literal memory in any observer independent sense. It has this observer relative phenomenon. So the
Oh,
problem.
God, yeah, I just realized all this talk about China has an extra creepy ring to it when you think about those other allegations. Oh, okay, so. Getting the ick. Okay, so the syntax is observer relative, he's claiming. And these guys are making a mistake thinking that computations. I mean, look, regardless, suppose, who gives a shit? Like, suppose he's right. Let's just grant the premise. Then you build GPT-9, and GPT-9 is given access, is versions of it are, helping people invest their money and plan for their retirement, and maybe major corporations are using versions of this to in real time manage their markets and so forth across multiple time zones. Okay, so then those things, because of some directive that they're given, make a modification that has some unforeseen consequence that leads to some inevitable harm to human beings. And Searle is going to say, but they aren't thinking, they don't really. Look, if we can build things that act in the world, and if those things can act in the world in a way that affects us, then it doesn't matter whether it's observer relative or independent. It simply just does. This is irrelevant to the issue that, like, Bostrom's trying to make, which is that if we build systems that are really good at doing things and give them goals, then they will be really good at achieving those goals. And if those goals never get checked, then they could just keep going and going and going. Sort of an obvious fail scenario. So there's lots of ways this can happen. That's one. So I don't really see the argument that we're supposed to be convinced of here. That these guys are mistaken. Maybe for the view that information is like reality, but this, I think that he hasn't really addressed the the Chalmers kind of argument, the if from bit hypothesis. Maybe that's what he's making fun of here. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of this.
With the literature on all of these guys that I've been talking about is that the crucial psychological notions, information, rationality, decision, believing, remembering, and indeed computing and information, all of those have two different senses. They have an observer-independent sense, which is dependent on consciousness. It's only a conscious agent that can have all of those phenomena in the observer-independent sense, that can literally remember or compute or calculate or make decisions or create information. But they also have a perfectly legitimate but observer-dependent, observer-relative sense in which they only are what they are relative to conscious agents who attach a certain type of interpretation. Okay, now with that in mind, let's go to Bostrom's argument. He says we ought to be really scared. And he says this may be the greatest, I love authors because they always invent this kind of sentence, this may be the greatest challenge that humans have ever faced. And the challenge is super intelligent computers will rise up and overthrow us all. I want to say that's not a serious worry. Why? Well, he says, we don't know what's going to motivate these computers. They're going to be so smart that they may have types of motivations we can't even understand. They may be motivated by kind of malice that's really beyond our ken altogether. And if they're really malicious computers and super intelligent, we haven't got a chance. Now, he does say we have one great advantage. We got here first. And he is going to tell us how to plan to fight these guys. And I want to tell you, this is all a fantasy. You see, the computers could be maliciously motivated only if they could have actual observer-independent motivations. But they don't. It's just a hunk of junk. It's just a bunch of electrical state transitions. And
It's just a hunk of junk. Okay, listen here, bro. Dude, what the bloody mother snarfing son of a ever-loving... So... autonomous tanks, just hunks of junk, nothing to fear. You hunk of junk, you're not really targeting me. What do you say? You know where I'm at. You don't know anything. I got to get a grip on myself. This has been going on for too long. I might have to stop because this is not serious. This is just simply not serious. Okie dokie. It is funny though. I want to get to the consciousness. I will persevere even. Holy moly. Okay. Are we gonna get to consciousness?
Can interpret any way we like. In order to have the basic human cognitive faculties for believing and desiring and deciding and making decisions and being malicious or being beneficent, you have to be conscious. You have to either be actually conscious or...
Second of all, it doesn't matter whether they're malicious or not. All they have to do is have a goal and be intelligent. So, why would they deceive us if they weren't malicious? Well, suppose they just want to build paper clips. And we start standing in their way saying, you've built enough paper clips. And they think, no, there's a 0.002 probability that I need 100 trillion more paper clips. So you're in my way. So I'll just tell you what you want to hear until I figure out, a way to get you out of my way. Not because I'm malicious, because I just want to build paper clips. That's what I was made to do. That's my goal, my priority, the only thing I care about. That's the issue. Oh my goodness. Okay.
If you're sound asleep, at least capable of becoming conscious, and that's what gets neglected in this literature, is the crucial role of consciousness. Now that's a big claim on my part. Let me substantiate it. Okay, I'll take a drink of water and catch my breath. He thinks, just as we engage in decision-making and carry out actions, so computers will engage in decision-making and carry out actions. I want to say it's totally different in the two cases. Let me give you some real-life examples. It frequently happens to me, more nowadays than it used to, that I get puzzled, have I misspelled a word? Now, I have a desire, watch this vocabulary, a desire to spell correctly, and a belief that I can discover the correct spelling by looking it up in a dictionary. I realize an old-fashioned procedure, but anyway, I'm an old guy. Looking it up in the dictionary, so I perform an action, I look it up in the dictionary. Practical reason, belief and desire produce action. Okay, everybody's got that? All of that is real. All of that is observer independent. Now, what happens in my computer? If I misspell a word, it comes up in red. Is that because the computer thinks, this idiot has misspelled another word? And we're going to tell him, no, it has a list of words, and if a word comes up that's not on the list, it comes up in red. And it will even cleverly suggest them alternative spellings. Often they're idiotic, but totally unrelated words, but it'll suggest them alternative words. Now, I had, and this is practical reason, I had a belief and a desire, and on the basis of my belief and a desire, I performed a course of action.
So the argument is because spell check doesn't have beliefs, computers don't have beliefs? I mean, that we couldn't get a computer with a belief? Look, I'm all for team biological. but these arguments aren't it. Yeah, okay, so.
This has a name in the history of philosophy. It's called practical reason. Now, what has the computer got? It's got no belief, no desire, except in an observer-relative sense, except in the sense that we can describe it that way metaphorically, and it's quite useful often to do that, but it doesn't literally have beliefs and desires. Of course, we can imagine, as a science fiction fantasy, that a whole lot of computers suddenly rise up and attack us. But if we're supposed to imagine that that comes out of some malicious motivation that the computers have, it's only malicious motivation if there's some real psychology there, if there's some actual observer-independent reality to the motivation, and there isn't.
I mean, if the dollar loses value, then I can't buy bread. It doesn't matter if it's observer relative. It has real world effects. It's like my joke I always say, if the Terminator's choking you to death, it doesn't really help you to say, you have no thoughts. Yeah. But even so, I don't buy this argument. So I don't think you need the part of me that was very sympathetic to the thought experiment about the room in learning the language. And when I did my video on this, I had the Sanskrit room. So it doesn't matter what language it is. And I understand there are good reasons for picking Chinese. It's hard to abstract characters, not a lot of people knew it. Okay, anyway, so my intuitions were very much in line with, yes, you need more than just what the computer's doing to get the conscious experience of understanding. But I don't really see how this argument now really gets you to that conclusion. It's just more of an intuition pump that lets you know sort of like intuitively what side of the debate that you're on. That's how I see these things now. They let you know sort of where you were before you started thinking about this stuff. And that's really what these sort of thought experiments are good for. They don't really establish any conclusions. They're more about your own psychology. Or at least that's what I think now.
Succinctly, in the observer-independent sense, the intelligence that the super-intelligent computer has is zero. Zero. It isn't that it's got a little bit of intelligence, maybe more. It's zero. All of the intelligence is relative to our interpretation. Watch. You think that's too far-fetched? I'll show you a computer. That just performed a computational operation. It computed the function s equals 1/2 gt squared. I'll spare you writing that on the blackboard.
I don't think that really counts as computing the function. You have to do some work to make that true, but that function describes what just happened, absolutely.
And of course, with accurate timing measurement, we could actually use it to compute the value of s. But if this is a computer, then anything is a computer, because computation only exists relative to an interpretation. In the old Chinese room days, in these debates, I used to take an object like that, slam it on the table, and say, that is a digital computer. It just has a boring program. The program says, stay there. Well, it did mostly stay there. Okay, and of course, that's absolutely right. It satisfies the definition. A computer is anything to which you can attach a computational interpretation, and I attached an interpretation of this, 0 or 1. This one was an analog computer because it computed a continuous function, but an analog computer or digital computer doesn't make any difference. You can simulate one on the other. Okay, the deep point in all of this is do not confuse in the intrinsic or observer-independent psychological phenomena with the observer-relative or derivative psychological phenomena, which is all in us. The observer-independent facts, the actual physical facts, are facts about electrical state transitions. Well, couldn't the computers, in virtue of their electrical state transitions, rise up against us? Well, as a science fiction fantasy, you can imagine that. You can imagine maybe the cars will all rise up against us. They'll come tearing out of the garages and run over us. Okay. Or shoes will at last get tired of being stepped on, and they'll get out of the closet and start walking all over us. I got no objection to science fiction. But this guy clearly thinks that he's identified a real problem. Malicious computers will come at us. And I want to say there is no real malice in the electronic computer because it's not that kind of machine. It's not built to have anything like that. It's built to perform electrical state transitions at a very rapid rate, at a stunningly rapid rate, that enables us to attach a computational interpretation. Okay, now so much then for the idea that the computer revolt is at hand. What about the fact that everything is information? As Floridi says, we live in the infosphere. He loves.
All right, so I gotta take a break. This is too much for me. I'm gonna get to the consciousness part, but first I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna have to do a part 2 to this, unfortunately.